Marco.
Sean, are we there yet?
We are there yet. We're on the road to San Francisco via Washington, D.C.
Wow.
We're doing a flyover.
It's, nowadays with digital and virtual, you can do a lot of crazy stuff you couldn't be doing years ago.
Exactly. So we're gonna take a pause in the Capitol and talk about the role of the board in driving cybersecurity programs, and first thing that comes to mind, Marco, is let's look to government agencies for advice on that. Because we share information, threat information, we share standards, but somehow I feel, this is my own perspective, I feel we fail to ask department leaders in government, how do you look at security programs? How do you look at insider threats? How do you look at, and I think there's a lot to the gain in the public sector. Sorry, the private
Absolutely.
sector from the public sector.
It's all connected. You can't just think in silos. And I think we've learned that in cybersecurity quite a bit. So let's do that. Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. So this is in connection to a panel that our guest is moderating, I should say, at RSA Conference coming up. And Dana Linnet, thanks for joining us. Good to meet you. Good to chat with you.
Thank you, Sean and Marco. It's a pleasure to be here.
And hopefully I pronounced your name right, but now is your chance to correct me.
Dana Linnet, yeah.
Dana Linnet, there you go. As you share a bit about who you are and your journey, I know there's a lot there. So please take your time to talk about your different experiences and different lives, all leading up to this point.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. And I mean, in the setup, we talk about, you talked about how we could glean a lot from government, but actually, I think, as you mentioned, government and the private sector have a lot to offer one another. And the key is taking the best practices and advice from all sides and coming up with something that is, going to work. We cannot work as a country if our companies are constantly at risk. And that's not a government problem, that's a private sector problem. But yeah, I can share some of the fun highlights from my career if you want to hear a couple of tales.
Please do. I often say I go back to when I was hatched. But you can go back as far as you like.
No, hatching's not that important. But I mean, you mentioned my past life. In my past life, I was a U.S. diplomat. And I first became a government CISO and ISSO, Information System Security Officer. It was baptism by fire in 2000. I was assigned overseas, and the State Department budget had been starved for decades. So we didn't have any of the IT systems personnel that we needed for all of the places. So they trained regular diplomats like political officers and economic officers and so on to become ISSOs and CISOs. And that befell to me. I had to be trained on how to become a network CISO and ISSO. And I thought, gee, is that what I signed up for? Not really, but it was really great learning. And back then, obviously, the tools were not as sophisticated and the threats were not as pervasive, but they were there nonetheless. But also because the budgets were starved, the fun didn't stop there. I also got to be we didn't have a regional security officer or any intel officers. So then they threw a couple extra hats on me on top of that. So I had all of the security operations at my overseas consulate, from cyber to counter surveillance to counterterrorism and so on. And those were really wild times. I'm glad they have since gotten the budget to hire the right people. But, because of that budget starvation, it really wasn't that great on our national security.
And before you move on, forgive my ignorance,
Sure.
Is that the early days of what is now known as CISA?
No, this was in the Department of State. We had our own CIO infrastructure. It was run out of the IRM Bureau. The CIO of the State Department runs their information management systems. They too will be on Zero Trust and all the other cloud lockdowns and so on. But those were the early days of cyber, when we did have, things happening, but they were not quite on the scale.
Well, I have to make an observation here, because It seems to me that every time we have conversation about cybersecurity, we always like, well, we finally learned that it's not just a tech issue.
Mm-hmm.
And now, we not only because of the gap in the industry, because we need to talk and tell story to the board and connect the business and everything else, we see that there is value in all background, right? I mean, psychology, philosophy, political science, policy, and everything. In a way, I'm thinking like, when this happened to you and you've been like, what do I have to do with this? But it's kind of like foreseen what now we're actually embracing. So some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have to say sometimes things happen for a reason, but back then, we're a very, you take your orders as long as they're lawful, you do them to the best of your ability. So I saw it as a real opportunity because I like technology and I had my own consulting company, before I was a diplomat. So, I really loved all those sort of early adoptions of all the little things. Remember ICQs, and instant messaging back then and all the fun things. So I was very attracted to the tech side, and I felt grateful that through this horrible circumstances, I was given the opportunity to do that. And then subsequently, and throughout my whole career, later on, my next tour after that, I was a political military officer in Estonia, and the Estonians were actively getting hacked and stuff by the Russians. The Russians and the Chinese were all targeting me by then as well. And it was pretty obvious. We sussed out pretty quickly what was going on. But I had the opportunity to help them I spearheaded the U.S. Support back in 2004 for the establishment of the NATO Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, where we could, get the Estonian, their advanced IT and their mindset and their learnings from all of this, and get that into the NATO ecosystem and get the information sharing going among allies. Because, back then they were a new member. They joined in 2004, and by 2008, they had opened the NATO Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. So again, I felt serendipitously grateful for, being able to stand up this teaching institution and this information sharing institution that was benefiting not just our country or Estonia, but the whole NATO alliance. And that was a huge opportunity.
And can I pause you there? Because
sure.
I know just enough to be dangerous about some of the stuff.
Most people are, Sean.
That's right. But because you said the word learning, right? And so I want to hone in on that a bit with this Center of Excellence, because the attacks were digital in Estonia, and it wasn't just targeting government entities. It was also targeting financial systems and other things like that. And to your point earlier, if our businesses can't survive, the country can't either. So anything, obviously don't give anything away that's going to put anybody in jeopardy, but anything you can share from that experience building the CCOE and its subsequent benefits and outcomes that have come from it that really hone in on that learning aspect, sharing information.
Absolutely. That's a great question, Sean. I think, first of all, what was really interesting back then from a U.S. perspective is I had to fight my own government to show that this was really important, because they're like, but they're on the border and they should only have tanks and they should only have stingers and they should only have like the sort of traditional defenses. And I said, you guys are missing the ball. Like, listen to the people who know more than you do about, about cyber. And you can't go to infantry people detailed to the U.S. European Command, who that's their whole mindset. And that's their whole security cooperation mindset. I think that was the early wake-up call. Was in 2004, I was really fighting. Like, people in my own government were like, you're wrong, and this isn't what they need, and this isn't the priority for the funding. And I'm like, you guys are going to miss the ball, because this is the problem. Like, this is going to be the asymmetric warfare problem. And then a year later, they get hacked, like you said. So I think the first learning is listen to people who know better, who are experiencing the digital threats against them. The other learning was think ahead, like what's coming around the corner, not just, the obvious of the big bad neighbor that has now invaded Ukraine. But it has to be more than that. But in terms of your question about the sort of cyber learning, I think the information sharing since 2008 has gotten so much more robust and comprehensive. And I think people have become more comfortable sharing their learnings and their information and putting that into the operational plan. So it has been quite gratifying to see, and I can't discuss what's in any of that, that's all classified, but in the public domain, to see that the learnings that they were actively, sharing have gone into new strategic concepts subsequently on how we, the US and our allies, can deal with this better, but also like operationally, like, okay, so what do we do? Like, what is the protocol when someone is shutting down your central bank, or your financial institutions? What are the protocol steps? And then the training that goes along with that. Like, I think that's when NATO really started to train on the civil military cooperation. Like, well, what can we share with the private sector and what should we share with the private sector? And then to get over some of the legal hurdles from there. So I think they've learned a lot, but, like we say, the attack sophistication, the attack surface, as it's commonly referred to in the businesses, has become so wide and so deep. So we have to constantly learn the lessons.
Well, I can think one word that kind of summarize what you describe, at least until the actions that are taken, but the whole transformation, the perception of what is going on, the will to say, well, I know we have always done things this way, we always prioritize this and that, but maybe it's time to listen to, as you said, the expert, the one that are kind of foreseeing the future. And for me, that word is culture. Right. So I want to make a connection with your panel at the RSA Conference, but culture take long time to change. At a societal level, takes a long, long time. But even in smaller group, it's a process. So your thoughts on that and how this came together, and maybe, is it a culture of accepting the change is the only constant? I'm going to use the quote here, but, seeing that.
It's great. And I think our whole panel is, as you rightly said, Marco, is around the cultural question. And so you have to ask yourself, people are so focused on firewalls and technology and spear phishing and all this stuff. Like, how do we stop it before it gets our stuff? And, we've spent a lot of time talking about that, whether it's zero trust in government or whether it's like, SOCs and other types of tools. I think we as human beings like easy buttons. This is why diet pills are super, why people spend billions in diet pills. We spend billions in things that, are kind of this easy button or things that we think should fix it. And I think as humans, just on a human nature level, we need to look at ourselves. And I think as much as boards, this is my personal perception, having been on boards, served on boards, seen boards operate, I think boards like to delegate things, and they like to say, as long as I'm on top and I see what's going on, but they don't necessarily see themselves as the answer to everything unless they're assigned a specific role, right? And I think my panel's I think the two experts that we have are going to dive into that. And if I could, I think if you ask how this panel came together, right? So, I'd love to share this story. It's a great story. So Mark Sachs, who's also one of the panelists, and we found our way. We met up with a guy, Andrei Sitnarski, who runs CyberNation Central. And if you go to his website, he'll tell you the story of how his company got hacked years ago and how he never wanted this to happen to anyone else. And I looked at this, having brought in my government experience. I mean, we didn't even talk about all this insider threat work that I've done both in the private sector and in government. But, when I was looking at what he was offering, and what his research had touched on, what his experience had touched on, and what the company built their systems around, it was really clear that that was lining up very clearly with what Jen Easterly of CISO said is the problem, which is human behavior. And, we have to look at ourselves to do things differently. And I went through his protocol and everything. And I, since then, have always recommended boards and C-suites to go through that, because that's the sort of gap between, like, what they are talking about is really addressing that gap between what boards learn. They go through the checklist and they have this and they're told this is what they should know. And by the way, most people I know, when I talk to fellow board members, they go, yeah, I have to go to this special training to learn how to be a board member. Like not all board members are created equally, right? And even the ones who are really sophisticated and experienced, they might not have the mindset that it's their job to lead that culture. And so I really found Cybernation Central to be very like have cracked the code. And they were kind of the only ones I saw out there really doing something that addressed that. And by the way, full disclosure, I get no money. I get zero referral money. I get no money, not a dime from them. So just want to put that out there.
Same here.
Yeah. So there you go. But you can use my name if you look on the website. But no, seriously, I urge you to go there, because when you look at where the breaches are coming from, it's like the enemy's us. The enemy's out there, but we don't have to help the enemy, right? And so I think that this panel, and Mark, he's like me. He's been all over private sector, government at an even much higher level and much more cyber focused than me. And I think we both found this topic of personal responsibility and behavior and culture, leadership culture, to be the missing link in all of this, right? Like, you can't have just the tech. You have to have the tech and the culture and the leadership mindset.
So many questions. So little time. I mean, one thing that's in my mind, and we'll see if we go there or not, but just this taking responsibility. I'm going to leave that sit there, and maybe we end up back there again. But you mentioned something about being trained to be a good board member, which to me then says we're, in one sense, maybe a good thing, sharing a broad set of knowledge and best practices with everyone on the board, so we all think the same and act the same, which can be good. But then the converse, or the alternate to that, is every person on the board has their own experiences and their own expertise that brings a diverse view of this. That may actually be better, because they may represent more of the organization and the people within it. And so I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's one or the other or both. But
no, I think you're right. I mean, everyone on a board has a role. And I don't want to tip off the panel too much, but I know Andre is going to discuss, like, what does it mean that you have these diverse roles, and what does that mean for your own cybersecurity? So I think the audience is going to get a lot out of his perspectives in particular about what that means. I don't think the approach that our panel will discuss is about watering down the diversity and perspectives of the board. It's quite the opposite. It's more like, given your responsibility, what should you be doing? What should you be thinking about? How should you be behaving? And why that's your job and your job alone, and not somebody else's to delegate to. Like, if everyone takes the responsibility with their own role, you should have a much more successful approach to your cybersecurity, both strategically and tactically.
What do you think?
Again, they're going to talk about it. I'm not stealing their thunder.
No. That's. I'm sure there's a lot to cover there.
Our goal is to tease enough for people to actually come. there. And if we're going to give away the end, it's not fun anymore.
Can't give away the end. I will say, Marco, the room is almost full. So I think there are about 50 seats left. And so depending on this, there may be a bigger room available. Who knows?
All right.
But I know, I think we're just like around 40, 50 shy of 300. So
very
clearly
good.
There's an interest.
Let's pack the room. I mean, it's an important topic, which is why
get your tickets now.
We're excited and honored to talk to you. That's right.
Get on the website, reserve your
seat. Yeah.
Reserve your seat. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you something. Like, I know you don't want to talk anymore or give away anymore about the panel, and I wouldn't allow you to do so. It's my responsibility for not to give up too much. But what do you expect from this year conference? Do you have something in mind? I mean, are you kind of sensing the theme of the conference, or apart from what they choose, RSA Conference, but like, what do you think is going to be the vibe? The words among peers in the corridors.
Well, that's that's something I've been thinking about, and this will surprise you, but this is my first ever RSA. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to promote the panel and promote this information. But I'm also excited to kind of soak it up and take it all in. And I have a lot of contacts in the cybersecurity world, which won't surprise you, as I'm my day job company is a public sector facing. We help companies that support the public sector. A lot of tech, a lot of policy and governance, and and CMMC and compliance and all that kind of stuff. But I think people are starting to realize that this isn't a you or a me problem. This is a we problem. Like, we're if we continue to work as silos, either as companies, private sector, and government. Obviously there's a competitive constraint, but I think ultimately the theme Stronger Together is really important, because if you have a weak link in your board or weak link in your leadership team, your executive leadership team, that's going to tank everybody. It only takes one, right? Like, it takes one mistake, one human behavioral mistake, or one person who doesn't have the right mindset or who is incapable of leading a cybersecurity culture from the top down. I mean, the people at the bottom, they're already being told, hey, don't click on any links, don't click on any, but it's, the folks at the top, they can't, I think there's a realization that we keep doing these things over and over again. Like, we keep trying to get at this problem over and over again, and it's not slowing the problem. Like, the number of hack attempts or insider threat or other attempts, that's not getting any less. Like, the amount of cybercrime isn't decreasing because we've all gotten smarter over the years, right? We're all armed with so much information. But the approach clearly isn't deterring the problem. So how can we work together in this? And I think we're going to see a lot of people come out of our panel going, aha, and who can I work with? What can I do? What can I take back to my ELT? What can I take back to my team or my board? How can I partner with, how can we really raise our game? And I think by sharing these insights with each other, it's really important. I really do believe in the theme Stronger Together anyways, a life philosophy, by the way. And I think, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to a lot of people. I'm going to just hear what they have to say, where they think things are going. I think people are at a crossroads right now, again, because the problem keeps getting worse. We keep going to conferences and we keep doing more and more things, but are we doing the right things? And so I'm going to be listening for what kind of changes are out there other than, locking down your whole system even more. I'm going to be trying to pick up on who out there is addressing that personal responsibility, or who out there is addressing, like, how do we work together with other people to, really create deterrence.
Well, I know Sean is going to close and make the call to action, but there is one sentence that you said, and it's kind of stick in my head. It's at least don't help the enemy. I feel like that's really strong, meaning you don't have to be an expert, but at least know enough that, together we can avoid a lot of things. Don't be so irresponsible, or I don't know if that's the right word, but conscious about what we do, because we are all potential entry door for a cyber attack. Right?
Exactly, Marco. And I think the other piece of advice is arrogance. I think because we have so many experts, like I'm excited to learn from this, like the 50,000 experts that are going to descend and swarm all around me at RSA and pick up the buzz and all the knowledge and all the things. But sometimes we get wrapped up like we're promoting ourselves as the experts, or like I think we all need to take a humility pill. And like this stuff can really truly happen to anybody, and it is happening almost to everybody. The probabilities are kind of high. So I think humility and learning and like taking down the arrogance factor a couple notches will help all of us, no matter how advanced we think we are in the field and how much we know. I think I know that's what I'm going to do, and that's what I'll be looking for, people who adopt that kind of philosophy. And I think there was something like, there have been different statistics out there. CNC on their website has like 97% of breaches are human. Verizon did a study, it's 82. I don't really care if it's 82 or 97. That's way too high. Like you say, Marco, like, don't help the enemy. We are too often helping the enemy. So, how can we lower our own arrogance notch enough to learn and to help each other and, really live up to this year's theme?
Yeah, helping the enemy is not the better together.
Help each other, right? Help each other, not the enemy, right?
Not the other. All right. And one way folks listening and watching to this can actually start to do that is by attending this panel, How to Create a Breach Deterrent Culture of Cybersecurity from Board Down. That's Monday, the 24th, 9:40 to 10:30, Moscone West. Evidently, only couple handfuls, depending on how many fingers you have, couple handfuls of seats left.
Maybe 40, 45. I can't remember, but something like that. And I will say, Andre and Mark, they are truly great to have on stage. They're pretty charismatic. They know what they're talking about. So I'm really blessed to have two phenomenal panelists on the panel. And this really is key for everyone, whether you were intending to step up your game. I think when you walk out, you're going to be like, oh my God, what am I not doing? You're going to want to take action. Yeah, yep. Take action.
I love it. That's the whole point. Think differently, take action.
And take action.
Better together. I think those are the 3 points. And with that, Dana, I want to thank you so much. I'm thrilled we were able to pull this together. Excited to meet you in San Francisco. Hopefully we get a chance to do that, and encourage everybody to join your session for a lively conversation, it seems, and lots of good insight. And with that in mind, everybody listening, watching, there'll be links to that session and Dana's social profile info, so you can connect with her and her panelists and grab that seat. And of course, stay tuned for all of our coverage for RSA Conference, ITSPmagazine.com/RSAC for this conversation and many others. Thanks everybody for joining us on our chats on the road to San Francisco, especially Dana. I think we'll call it there, and we'll see you all soon.
Great. Thank you both so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Stay tuned, subscribe, follow us.